Well, I'm joined now with more by Josh Lipsky, the Director of Global Business and Economics with the Atlantic Council. So, Josh, how shocked was China by Trump following through on his promise? Can we expect to see any reaction here or a return to a trade war?
Well, thanks, Natasha, for having me. And the answer is that China was not shocked at all. This was the price of doing business. And they knew when they rammed through the national security law that the U.S. would do something along these lines. Maybe not precisely this, but they knew it would take this form. And it actually could have been far worse, so we can discuss why. So there'll be some more retaliatory measures from the Chinese. They'll sanction some U.S. officials, maybe target a few U.S. companies like we saw them try to do today. But basically, they knew what was going to happen, and they're not that upset about it because in the long term, what the U.S. did will help reintegrate Hong Kong into the Chinese mainland. And that, after all, is the goal of the Communist Party.
Well, how will Donald Trump's decision to revoke Hong Kong's special status, affect the territory's stature as a world-class trade hub?
Well, I think we just have to be realistic and honest here and say this is the end of an era in Hong Kong. It will no longer be a global financial center in the long term. It will be an important financial center. There'll be law firms and banks and businesses that do business in Hong Kong, just like they do in Shanghai, just like they do in other cities in China. But what the Chinese have done here and what the U.S. has done in response is basically say Hong Kong will be treated like any other city. And that's what the Chinese want in the long term. But there's much more the U.S. could have done. They could have depegged the Hong Kong dollar from the U.S. dollar. They could have sanctioned Carrie Lam, the executive of Hong Kong. So what both the U.S. and Chinese are saying is we understand the new status quo. The U.S. might not like it, but there's not a lot they can do about it.
How is the business world reacting right now? Are corporations worried about what's happening here?
They certainly are. I mean, corporations are anxious. There was a survey saying that 70% of businesses on Hong Kong were more worried than they were a month ago. And I can tell you from personal experience, I know that businesses are thinking of moving out. And really what you're going to see is that there are some companies that are going to diversify where they are in Asia. So some are going to move some operations to Singapore, other major financial centers within Asia. So Hong Kong will still be a place of business, but there's no way companies can make it their sole focal point for the Asian market. And you saw this just yesterday. The New York Times moved a historic bureau from Hong Kong to Seoul, and they won't be the last to do that. So this is a sea change in what's happening in the region.
They moved 1/3 of their staff already, so, it says something. What does this mean for the rocky U.S.-China relationship as a whole right now moving forward?
Well, look, we have to take a step back and say that the entire global economy is in a very fragile place. We're suffering the worst recession since the Great Depression in the world. And no one wants to re-trigger a trade war in the midst of that. So while you'll see heated rhetoric from the U.S. and heated rhetoric in response from the Chinese, the actual measures you're going to see and their economic impact, I think are actually going to be fairly muted before the next election here in the States. And you can see that just by the nature of the trading relationship. Hong Kong, the trading relationship with the U.S. is only about $17 billion. Compare that with the rest of China, $750 billion. So this is not just about economics. It's about culture. It's about politics. It's about what Hong Kong means. And Hong Kong will never mean quite the same thing to the world as it meant before these recent actions.
All right. Josh Lipsky, thank you so much for joining us with